So even on the budget itself, as I understand it, Mark, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you're not done on that because you have the outlines, you have the overall number, but then there are appropriations that have to be done. So we're not sure exactly how this money is going to get spent and where it's going to be spent. How much influence will the White House have over that, and where are you trying to direct it?
David, what happens in the process is the White House usually submits a budget in February that should help guide the appropriators who walk through the committee votes and then hopefully bring a bill to the floor and complete the process by the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. Because there's a budget caps deal in place, it does make this year's budget probably a little bit less influential, but it gives a guide to Congress to say this is where the White House and the administration want to go. And so this budget should be influencing the spending bill that hopefully will come forward next month to fund the rest of 2018, as well as to provide a guide for the 2019 process, too.
And when Donald Trump campaigned for president, and then after he became president, he was steadfast in saying, we need more growth. We need to grow the economy. You have helped him in that program, basically. Is there a point where people get worried there's too much growth? In this sense, we could overheat the economy, we could get inflation, we could get the Fed reacting with interest rates. Is there a concern about that? And is there anything about at this point that you can do about it?
Well, sure there is. I think that's a natural common tension. You don't want to put too much fiscal stimulus into the process that overheats and creates too much inflation. Yet at the same time, David, I think what we suffered for the last 10 years is that wage stagnation has been dominant. People have not seen any increase in their wages. The economy has been stagnant. The 1.8% GDP growth of the average of the 8 years of the Obama administration was simply abysmal. And there's no way that we can ever pay off our national debt if we're growing at that level. So therefore, we have to have more growth. I think some of the tension you've seen in the markets lately, in fact, is a reflection of the expectations of higher inflation. And that's not all necessarily bad. Again, if we're actually seeing wage growth again as the economy heats up, that's not bad. But you obviously, as you said, you need to temper that, and there are ways to that both in monetary policy and fiscal policy.
As you say, Mark, the expectations of inflation may be coming up somewhat, although they still are relatively modest so far. They may heat up still. There's also concern about the amount of supply of debt, essentially, because the government will be borrowing so much because of deficit spending. One of the things, as I understand it, in your budget that you brought out yesterday was a 2% a year cut, starting after this year, in discretionary. Is that realistic? Will Congress really give you those kinds of cuts?
David, I hope so. You know, last year when the White House put forward a budget, there's a lot of people in Congress who condemned the size of the deficits, and yet they summarily threw our budget in the trash can and said that the cuts were too steep and too harsh. That we have in this year's budget, we're proposing $3 trillion in cuts over the 10-year window to get it to $3 trillion less than what the baseline has. We hope that Congress will take those cuts sincerely. We hope that we cannot continue to spend the way that we have. And there are things, they're realistic cuts that we can make. And we hope that Congress will partner with us on that.
How conscious are you, Mark, at the White House of the bond market as a practical matter? I mean, we've seen this before. You remember that famous quote from the 90s about if somebody wanted to die, they want to come back as the bond market because they're so powerful. Are you aware of that? Are you concerned at all about what are called bond vigilantes? That, in fact, the bond market will say this is too much, and then as a result, rates will have to go way up.
Are we concerned? Of course, the Treasury Department watches that. It's a factor in formulating policy. But right now, David, we feel like the economy and the thing that, as you said, the president promise made on the campaign trail is we need to get this economy growing again. And that's what we've been focused on. And so we're encouraged at 3% GDP growth over the last 3 quarters. We're encouraged that 4.2 million Americans have received either a wage increase or a bonus in the last 6 weeks since we passed the tax cut plan. And we're also encouraged that in January, there was a 5% increase in federal revenues. That's something that's not gotten as much attention. So we are encouraged by the growth in the economy.
So, Mark, as I said in the introduction, you still have on your agenda, as far as I can tell, immigration as well as infrastructure. Again, a plan that you came out with yesterday. On infrastructure specifically, what role do use taxes have in this? And specifically, would the president support increasing the gas tax? It hasn't been increased in 25 years now.
At this point, we're not advocating tax increases, David. What I think you see the president doing with the $200 billion he's put forward that's included in that budget is that we believe that by partnering with local governments and municipalities, we can actually spur additional investment, as the president said, between $1.5 and $1.7 trillion. The way that works is you provide seed money, and then a public-private partnership comes in and matches that and puts in more additional dollars. It's not the federal government mandating, here's a project we expect. We're offering an investment that if local municipalities want to partner with us, more dollars will come in and hopefully more projects will be funded.
And various people go back and forth on whether that works or not, but let's assume it works for that $200 billion. One thing I'd love to know is that new money? I mean, how does that fit with the budget caps? How does it fit with what's already been approved? How much of it is savings, which would actually perhaps come out of infrastructure spending?
So, David, the $200 billion does fit within the budget caps that have been put forward by Congress, and it is within our budget. So it's not as if it's new dollars in the sense that it's never been appropriated before, but it also has been included in that budget cap ceiling. So it's not going above what's already been passed by Congress.
On immigration, that's going to be a hot topic for discussion. Actually, Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, started the discussion yesterday in the Senate, and he's going to try to get to 60 votes with something. If they get through the Senate and they get through the House, and it does not include what the president has called chain migration, other people call it something else, or the lottery, will the president sign it if it's really specifically on Dreamers and the wall?
David, our concern is that if you end up just kind of doing this and you do a piece of it and you kick the can down the road, we're going to be back here in a few years. In other words, if you're saying we're going to legalize this class of people, and what we're going to do is even provide a pathway to citizenship, but we're not going to do anything to actually fix the flow coming in from the southern border in the future, you're going to be back here in another couple years. We believe that all four pillars, from border security to the protection of the nuclear family, reunification, as well as ending the visa lottery program, are all important to complement the legalization of the DACA population. And even as you've said, the president going a step further and saying we'll expand that population beyond what we started with, and we'll even provide a pathway to citizenship for them. So we think our proposal is very generous, and it's the way to make sure that we're not back here again in a couple years dealing with the exact same problem.